our second edition of Strange Bedfellas. Today, we want to talk to you guys about how far political influence runs and are we actually being manipulated by our religions in politics, or is politics manipulating our religion? I don't know, but we're sure going to find out. Today, I want to start off with this. We'll start with the. I'm going to bring you up here, Miss Amanda, with the second coming of Trump, the Christian prophets article from Politico that you sent me here. Now, this was really interesting to me because I had never heard of Paula White. And it's kind of funny that she's been so influential on the religious aspect of Trump's whole campaign, from what I understand. But do you want to start by telling us a little bit how you got involved with this article? How did you come across this? This is
Right.
really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So the article itself, I wasn't familiar with until I did my research this week. But these things have been talked about extensively within the Reformed circles that I'm involved in, because we see it as heretical, as blasphemy. We see the dangers of going into politics, period, with a religious political intent. And as far as I can see, Paula White's agenda is more political than theological. So when she calls herself the spiritual advisor, or she's referenced as the spiritual advisor to Trump, that's a misnomer. She's not spiritually advising him as an individual in his private affairs, his religious life. She's informing him mostly on what the will of the religious right, her agenda is. And as if we are a monolith, it'd be great if the Christian faith were like that. But we have many different sects of evangelicals, even what's under that umbrella, denominationally. So there's a different school of thought for each denomination that you have out there under the umbrella of Protestantism. So when we look at the country as a whole, basically the founding fathers understood that the earliest settlers were Protestant by and large, but that did not mean they were all attending one particular church. So what to separate us from that church and state, that they codified that in the Constitution because they saw that as a problem. Basically Protestantism is by and large anti-Catholic, is this in the simplest terms. It's anything that's against Catholicism. So that runs the gamut from Jehovah's Witnesses to Hare Krishna to, it's anything and everything that's not Catholicism. Right. So it's not by necessity, it is not Christian in nature. So even pagans would be under the Protestant umbrella according to American terms.
Right, right.
So the Catholicism is a church state, and that is how they operate things. The church dictates their politics. The founders wanted something different. They wanted something to be separate from and a balanced power to the power of the church, which had a great hold on many people at the beginning. So, and even now, even if you subscribe to atheism, that is a form of secular religion. You have your tenets, you have your idols, your popes, so to speak. And, I see a thread running where religious people are putting it upon themselves more and more to be politically active in the social sense versus standing up for their principles. If it were all about principles, then they would just state their case and that be it. But they are pushing to, reform things themselves, um, and push back on the world, which is by definition anti-Christian. So
Right.
you have some kind of play in between there where I believe it falls into not election fraud per se, but definitely voter intimidation or manipulation well before we get to the ballot box.
Oh, great points. Great points. And, I think one of the biggest things with especially religion is the I guess just obliviousness to the fact that you may be talking to a bunch of people who subscribe to a generally like belief, but you're 100% right. The details is, really what they want you to focus on, because depending on which sect and which um, aspect you subscribe to, you're going to come across little differences here and there. And that's what kind of gives you your different flavors of Christianity and Catholicism and, every other one that you want to talk about, because obviously there's a laundry list. And that goes for a lot of different religions. That's not just your Catholics, that's your Jews, your Hindus, your Buddhists, your pagans. One of the actual quotes for being a pagan is, not all pagans are, or all pagans are, not all pagans are witches, but all witches are pagans. It's very confusing, and people are like, well, what do you mean? Well, yeah, we all subscribe to multi deities, but we don't all follow the same path. So when you start talking about these evangelicists and these, I call them televangelists, because that's pretty much what they do. Is they get on, they get on TV, and they're really pumping the money aspect of everything. And in this particular case, she's pumping politics, and it's almost the same thing that we saw. Was that a big thing back in the 70s? I can't remember the two who were very big, and they ended up being in a scam or something, to evangelists that got caught up in all that big scam. They scammed their whole audience. I can't remember. I'll have to do some research on them. But the Billy Graham article that you sent me actually got me thinking about them. And, I agree with what you said, that these people now think that that's the way to subscribe to their faith. And, in order to be a better Catholic, a better Christian, they're being told that they've got pretty much no choice. And
Right. It's
it
about how
is.
to vote.
It's brainwashing. It's generalized brainwashing. And the other article that you sent me here, to move forward, is the 29% of Republican voters think Donald Trump could get reinstated as president this year. So when we talk about these televangelists getting the spotlight, having the spotlight, they really take over a big chunk of your voice when you're talking about representation in government for a certain theological ideology, right?
Correct. And I view it the same way. These people claim to speak on behalf of God, for God, God says, and then the rest of it is their idea, not
Right.
anything you can find in the Bible. And when they start talking about God told me that Trump is going to be X, Y, Z, whatever, that's crossing a line, because people buy into that, not because they think that Trump is great, but because they think God is great and God is infallible. And if God is telling someone that they trust and respect what's going to be, then how could they go against it? How
Oh,
should they
absolutely.
go against it?
Why
And so
would
they're
they?
they're voting based on, for that higher idea of I'm doing what God said to do,
It's
based on nothing
treacherous.
other than Paula White saying so,
it's
or
it's
whoever.
very treacherous. And
Yeah,
especially because these people, they don't just they just don't tune in for their political feel goods. These are actually people who are preaching, and they're preaching from, their pulpits. They're reaching their their churches. She does the online thing though, right? Does she have a physical
She
ministry?
has a physical ministry in Apopka, Florida. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
But it is televised. It is international. She
right.
travels. She speaks. She writes books. She makes money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was the question that I was going to ask. I know that she did a lot of traveling and things, but how much time do you have to actually sit down and live your doctrine if you're just busy kind of hopping around doing your own thing, making money?
None. That's a
True,
short answer. Very
true.
short. You cannot
Well,
serve two masters.
no, you can't, and it's even more devious in my opinion, because like I said, we started talking before this, and we made reference to this particular article with the 72% of Republican voters. um I don't believe those numbers, and I know that you don't believe those numbers either, but it's very easy to get people who aren't paying attention, or the other side of the coin, the Democrats, to believe these numbers because of headlines. And you said that about the last article before we got to actually recording, was that these headlines are pushing and pushing and pushing. And I know that we've talked about it so many times, with brainwashing in the mainstream media, but nobody's talking about this particular subject, it coming from a religious aspect. And it's almost taboo to even suggest to a Catholic or a Christian that they're being manipulated by their faith.
Correct. Correct. And it's really interesting. I find, because again, the headline itself is what captures the imagination. The validity is not what's on trial, because we already know no one reads beyond the headline. But
No.
if these are our sources for citation, then this is really all we can go on. If
Right.
I want to find out as an individual how many people think a certain way, I have no other resource than the mainstream, what's out there to tell me. And then I have to weigh it myself, whether it's true or not. But so many people don't. And it is the easiest way to write off a very large portion of a society, because they're kooky. They're
Yes.
writing us off as the kooky Christians, the evangelical extremists. They're coming for your rights. The same line that the left uses on us. They're coming for this. They're coming for that. And we battle back in the same kind of way, and I don't think that that's the correct route. I don't think we're being productive or smart about this anymore. It is tit for tat, revenge upon revenge, like gang style warfare. We're not getting anywhere other than disenfranchising voters well before an election season. They already have their minds up that whether they can sign on to this or not. And if
Yeah.
they don't want to sign up to all this kookiness that's going on, don't feel like defending it, they're out. And then
Yeah.
what? Voter
Then,
suppression. Is that not voter suppression?
well, it's a very hard case to prove for voter suppression, unless, of course, you want to bring race into it, because religion seems to be the hardest conversation to have. We have no problem talking about race. We have no problem talking about gender. We have no problem talking about police brutality. We have no problem talking about anything else. But when it comes down to religion, we're so pitted in our corners against each other that we forget education is still the key in every aspect of life. Now, whether that goes for your, laws, or what's permissible in your local grocery store, it goes back down to your religious aspects as well. So not only do you have this kind of narrative that Christians are, haha, look at them, they're putting their faith in God and they think God's going to make all this stuff happen. They're putting out that they're kooky, but they're also kind of tying you guys in, and us too, and we'll get to that in a minute. But as people who don't understand the Constitution, And I think that this is more offensive than even coming after somebody for their religious aspects. But with this article, the 29% of Republicans, first off, just because we're Republicans, who's to say that we are guaranteed Christians, let alone subscribe to the televangelist Christian method
Right.
of thinking? But then on top of that, to tell me that 29% of us don't realize there's no constitutional remedy for a fraudulent election. Come on. You don't have to be a NYU scholar to know that no, nothing like that exists in the Constitution, and we've been battling this for years. Years.
Right. Exactly. I mean, again, they like to umbrella us under stupid, uneducated, incapable of understanding politics. We're rubes, country come to city kind of people, and I think that's largely wrong. I mean, that number is staggering to me, but still
Yeah.
as a minority,
Yeah.
a large minority, it's not even close. And but yeah, I mean, but again, these people are ascribing to something that's not political. They're being told that this is theological, that this is bigger than politics. This is God's will. And
Right.
that's what worries me among the evangelicals, the 29% of evangelicals that are ascribing to this whole reinstatement business. It's because, they're being told by their own parishioners and clergymen that with all things, the God can do
With
all
God, all
things.
things are possible. Right.
Right. And so
Right.
they're being told that, and they're saying, yeah, we know it's against the Constitution, but God doesn't play by the Constitution.
So
And
how does that negatively impact people who are new to the faith, or those that are just kind of prescribed to the faith? What happens when you put all your faith into this and dash? There's no ending to your happy ending doesn't pan out. What do you think that plays on their psyche after something like that happens?
that's what leads to radicalism, violence, extremism. That's what worries me, because when the prophecies run out and they don't come true, then where do these people go? Um, do they turn violent? We kind of saw that on the 6th. You had people who were there for the right reasons, and you had people there because they were grossly delusional. They're on film. They're out there, and for us to deny that as the right and say, oh no, everybody there was completely sane and it was orderly, and that's misjustice. It's injustice to the people who are actually sane, because it's gaslighting on the right,
Well, I
saying,
think
oh
the
no,
I think the
all that
QAnon
crazy,
people, the
yeah,
QAnon
all the
people are
crazy
getting
saw, they weren't crazy. They're telling the truth.
right.
Something doesn't
Well,
equate to me.
see, with QAnon people, a lot of them get a bad rap, and let's put it this way: when you're putting pieces of truth out there, now we all know that QAnon was debunked. Fine, you can call it debunked. Some of the information that they put out there was good in context. One piece of information I actually did a video about was the coin guide, the coin agency that was written under the Obama administration. It was a handbook on how to pretty much conquer and divide and convert a foreign government into a democracy. And it was pretty interesting when you watch the guide be written here in front of you, and then watch society play out by the guide's handbook, and pretty much verbatim for what was said. So when we talk about doing research and kind of knowing what you know and taking that kernel of knowledge and building upon it, like I did in the video yesterday, it's very important to have a solid base point from where you come from, and then wade through all the BS, because, like you said, now you've got them running misinformation with all these headlines that they're doing, and then they fight with themselves over the information they put out, because I don't think that you sent this to me. I think that I come across it, and it's the LGBTQ article that I was telling you that they caught Paula White going viral, speaking in tongues and She was pissed about losing to Biden, and it actually proves everything that you just said, that they came out with this narrative. They pushed, this televangelist as Trump's personal minister. She was doing all these things. They were so close. They were so close. Now everybody's got this snapshot of what Trump is, what Trump supporters are, and now they can turn around and say, "Ha ha! Isn't it so funny? Look at her. We told you that they were crazy."
Right. And yeah, and exactly. I mean, how far down the road before, like if these prophecies do not come true in August, and they won't,
No, they won't.
obviously,
No.
what will happen then for the midterms? Will these voters go nuts? Will they be incarcerated by time it's, where is the deviousness going to go? Because again, it has to go somewhere. They're not going to go away. That's the
No.
only thing. That's the only thing I can say for sure, is they're not going to go away, because they haven't yet.
Right.
If 4 years we cannot pour cold water on this as a Republican Party and say, no, that's not what we're about, then where does it end? Does it end when we start? I mean, the people on the sick, some of them are still in jail.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah,
of
they
them
are.
come out of this with a felony record. Some of these people are never going to be able to vote again.
And a lot of the people that are still in jail and a lot of people that are coming out with felony records aren't actually the ones that caused any of the destruction or the damage to the property, which is
Of
absolutely
course.
insane. And
But it's
still
having that
have yet
felony record.
yeah, we still have yet to hear anything about Ashley Babbitt. Nobody is saying her name on mainstream media, left wing circles. Where's the outrage there? When you talk about the riots and things that happened in the summer, and how everybody was so upset because this person got hurt or that person got hurt. Okay, look, you've got somebody who had the right idea, showed up at the right place, didn't come armed, wasn't being violent. Was she somewhere where she probably shouldn't have been? Yeah, I will concede to that. But was she doing something that warranted getting shot? No, I don't agree with that either. If you're talking about somebody violently assaulting a police station and burning out the interior to release the inhabitants into the mob, and that person gets hurt, and you're, oh my God, watch out, this person's hurt. I'm gonna be a little bit more sympathetic to the girl that went to the Capitol to redress her grievances and got shot dead than the person who was banging on the police station door and got hurt. That's my personal opinion. But with that being said, it is now everybody that protested in the summer, they're all sane. They did what our founding fathers did. The founding fathers were rebellious and they caused havoc, and that's what they did. But they
Right.
didn't ever go to England and say to the king, please don't do this to us anymore. I mean, we go back to that not knowing history. We go back to not understanding that, yeah, you know what? When we looted and rioted, we burned our own things. We destroyed our own property. We destroyed what we had built here. Yeah, it would have been great to go, the boat trip across the ocean and burn down England. That wasn't an option. So we destroyed our own things and we made it so that they couldn't profit off of us. Here it's the other way around. You're allowing them to profit off of you personally and your cause, because you look at Black Lives Matter and how much money they put back into themselves, when in reality she didn't turn around and spend any of that money to reform any legislation. She didn't put that money into the federal justice system so that they could get better quality in prisons. She put that into a house for herself and her family.
Right. Right. And when I see the same thing when it comes to, any of those measures, left or right, backfiring on itself, because like I said, we have seen it play out on the left last year. Promises were made prior to 2016 during the Obama years. You had Bernie Sanders telling people that they were going to be able to get this and they should get that. He got them into a mindset of, I am deserving of. And
Yes.
when it didn't happen and they were disenfranchised, it evolved into this violent takeover. And I worry that if on the right we go down the same path and don't address these things as like setting them straight and saying, look, this is not how it works. This isn't what the Republican Party is about. And we let that go unfettered. And we, at the same time, tacitly approve of what's being said. Not one article can I find where Trump himself pours cold water on all these things. He
No.
does not. He does
No.
not say, look, I'm not Jesus. He doesn't say, look, I am not going to come save the country. He feeds into it with his silence. And then these people speak on his behalf and on the behalf of God or whatever, and people follow suit. When that falls apart, then what? Then what? And that's what I worry about. What kind
Well,
of future am I leaving to my children if we don't stand up now and say, look, these are not principles of the Constitution, of a free and fair election. This is bribery in many cases. You know, that the left senators promising everyone they're going to get their $2,000 if they get elected. The $2,000, it was basically already promised to the American people by the previous administration.
well,
You
it's
know,
funny you brought a really interesting point that just crossed my head. You said, they were promised all these things. Well, it's actually really funny because Obama did the same thing. You remember he was going to get a new cell phone for everybody. He was going to pay off your mortgage. He was going to make sure you had a car. And none of these things came into fruition either. And actually, now that I'm sitting back in hindsight and looking across the board, it's like, okay, now I get it. We escalated because they were made promises and they didn't get them. And it wasn't like they could turn it around on Obama and say Obama didn't produce, because Obama had to be great. Obama had to be the best of the best. He had to be the top of the echelon. And they did the same thing to him. They turned him into a messiah for the left, and everybody worshiped the ground that he walked on. So now, when we came out of the 8 years of Obama and nobody had changed, everybody was still in poverty, everybody was still in their ruts, so to speak. They couldn't get off of welfare, they didn't see any change in their material status. They became violent and they didn't get what they wanted out of the 2016 election, which was Hillary Clinton making the elaboration of a promise of what Obama said he couldn't get done for them, and it exploded. And I really do think now, here we are at 2020 to a combustible state where, yeah, you know what, you feel that way about the evangelists. My goodness, we haven't even touched base on what the witches said that they were going to do to Donald Trump when he took office in 2016 and 2017. I don't, we don't play favorites here on the channel. So when Amanda told me she wanted to do this video, I really didn't want to talk about Christianity, and I thought, well, this isn't my place to say anything. But it dawned on me right before we started recording that we're a bunch of nut jobs over here too, and we're all supposed to be lumped into this crazy train that they call witchcraft. And I am a witch and I am a practicing witch, but not all witches are built the same. So these are some of the things that I came across, and I'm sure that you remember too. Whatever they said they were going to hex him. Um, First thing that I want to say about magic is, if you don't subscribe to the fact that what you put out comes back to you, I don't take you seriously, because we're trying to prove that magic is a physical, and it actually interacts with your surroundings. So, in a scientific term, if you're manipulating energy, it's got to have a reaction. There's got to have some sort of consequence to it. Now, Catholics call it the golden rule, but when you're talking about, oh, I can come out here and I can cast a spell and nothing bad's going to happen to me, you look like a weirdo. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I know some of you guys aren't going to be happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true for every group of people. Like I said, no matter what you subscribe to religiously, we all have some type of meaning to our life, and that's atheists included. Their meaning to life is the right here and now.
Right.
And so they are, I mean, it's understandable that if they don't get what they want right here and now, that they would immediately turn violent. And I
True.
think you find that a lot within the Antifa movement. These
Yes.
people, by and large, are the nuns of the country, the NONEs. So they don't ascribe to any particular faith. Therefore, that lack of fills is a secular hole that they have, in their ideology.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, so even them, not making a choice is still a choice,
It's still a
kind of a thing,
choice.
right? So, so no matter what you subscribe to in the afterlife or in the here and now, definitely your motivations are grounded in that. And so we have to look at the different agendas. And if we're going to look specifically at a pagan agenda, then we have to be honest about what it means.
Yes.
What do they want to accomplish for what I can only assume is the here and now of it? Because, your afterlife is vastly different than my own. So, I'm working for my afterlife. I think on the pagan side, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you're more or less working in the here and now for balance.
Balance, and like I said, that plays into your afterlife for the simple fact that you obviously don't want to trudge around in negativity for the rest of your life. So how about you just be positive about things?
Right.
So very simple, very basic, but you're absolutely right. And it's interesting just from their point of view, because it wasn't like they even had a plan or that they even really subscribed to what they were doing. And anybody that practices magic with any type of seriousness knows that you have to have one intent. So to say, well, I don't want him to be mean anymore, you don't necessarily have that power even if you wanted to, even on a vastly large Hollywood sense of magic, or how they pitch magic to the average person. You don't have that. There's still stipulations. The genie can't raise the dead. They can't make people love you. You've had these stipulations on free will for a very long time. So it was funny to me going through it, almost as funny as it is for you to watch these televangelists, because
Right.
then they go ahead and they pull up these celebrities. They have Lana Del Rey. I don't know who Lana Del Rey is, but apparently she's famous. So, she's gonna join the group of witches and cast the mass spell, and I'm like, okay, so just throwing that out there. What if your intention isn't the same as their intention? How does that then convey through the magical realm as to getting it done? And yeah, I mean, you can cast different spells, but again, the whole point of this is so that we all converge and come together, and it's more powerful, it's more energy, it's more meaningful. So, what was the goal of that? I mean, at least with the televangelists, they're upfront with you. We say God said this, and they run with it. I mean, goodness gracious, witches, get it together. We can't subscribe to one thing, let alone one spell, let alone what we're doing it for.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dichotomy, to say theologically that we operate as Christians one way. We think about God in one way, but then in our own lives operate a different way, as if
Yes.
being God ourselves. And
Yes.
so I think that's where we run into dicey territory. Like you're saying, witches think they might have power they don't actually possess. Christians are ascribing to powers that are not rightfully theirs.
Right.
And in my circles, in the Reformed circles, that is dangerous territory. You are on a broad path to destruction. Quick,
Right.
adjustment, justice. We can't stand for that. Now, again, in Reformed circles, this is being talked about. Unfortunately, we're a minority. So
Right.
whereas 37%, I think it's 39%, I can't remember the statistic now, of Protestants in the US are Pentecostal.
Wow.
The Reformed movement doesn't even make a statistic. We're not listed. We're not listed in the statistics categorizing. So Catholics are, the Pentecostal, the Charismatics, the Baptists, all of these other denominations. Now, again, there are Reformed Baptists, there are Reformed Methodists, but Reformed theology is its own thing. And so you find it within a few denominations, but again, those statistics really speak to what captures the country. It's smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
by and large. And
Yeah.
for anyone out there, again, I want to preface what I'm going to say. I'm not speaking to any one individual's salvation. I don't want to presume to think that if you're involved in these movements that you are somehow damned to hell.
No.
I'm not passing judgment on anyone individually, but the movement itself is
Is dangerous.
antithetical to the Bible. So please examine your sources. If you're going to say labels are important, if
They
you're going
are.
to say you're a Christian, please know what that means. Just like if
Yeah.
you're going to say you're a witch, please know what that means. It doesn't mean that you're Sabrina, I would hope.
You're absolutely right, and you know what? That's what actually like it clicked. It clicked right before we started recording that this was the best way to handle this video because we are very unique subsets of our stereotypical religions, and we are dying breeds, both you and I together, because our voices are not reaching. And I brought up the Nixon Bill Graham article because as soon as you say Billy Graham, everybody's going to know who he is. I know who he was. Like you said, I wasn't born at the time, but Billy Graham is a big, big name. And if you don't know who he is, I suggest you do your homework because you're missing a big chunk of what we're talking about here. And it's just to prove that again, none of this is new under the sun. This has been going on for some time, and now that it is picking up the steam, this is why it's important that we do have these conversations and we do step out and say, yeah, I'm the one that doesn't agree with any of you guys, and here's how I think it is, and you can dislike it, but what I'm saying isn't antithetical to you, but what you're saying is antithetical to me. So one of us here is a little bit more tolerant than the other. Just throwing
Right.
that one out there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's amazing that Billy Graham is associated more with politics and presidents than he is with his message.
Yeah.
If you ask the average person who Billy Graham was, they would associate him with one of the 12 presidents that he has advised. That is crazy. He has been in politics since the 60s officially, but behind the scenes has been used by politics since the 40s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're talking about almost 100 years now, 80 years of influence. And his death in 2018 did not slow the train because Franklin Graham has kept on. And he has taken it to an extreme. What I found most poignant about the articles regarding Nixon and Billy Graham specifically in his latter years, latter interviews, regretted every time he got involved in politics, recognized that as a minister that he overstepped his bounds. And
Yeah.
I think that's the key point, the takeaway is that, yes, we expect individuals in government to have their own religious faiths, biases, and that's fine. But those things cannot run the state. We cannot elect a candidate because a particular movement has declared that God said so.
And we said off camera, we brought up Raphael Warnock, and he's not getting out of this video because he is, again, for lack of a better word, the personification of Billy Graham if Billy Graham won office. That's how I kind of look at Raphael Warnock, because everything out of that man's mouth is related to voting being a religious experience. It has to be done under a religious pretense, and anything that isn't being done in the name of religion when it comes to politics is blah, blah, blah. So, not only is it offensive to you because you obviously don't subscribe to his line of thinking and making politics and religion synonymous, but hello, did you even stop to think for maybe 2 seconds? Other people might not go to the church. You may not go to church at all. That don't subscribe to your religion at all. Don't believe in any of what you're saying. Like, not just a wrong think, if you will, but just a dismissive off the top. Or, like you said, is that the plan? Is that so that I don't pay attention to what you're doing, so that I don't want to listen to you? You're going to just Bible talk me to tune you out?
It's possible.
Because
he's tuning out more than just you as a pagan or an atheist or someone of Hindu, persuasion or something like that. He's turning off actual Christians,
yeah,
and giving us a bad name, and this is the analogy that I've kind of come to. They use blasphemy to create a heresy to advance themselves politically.
Yeah.
And
you should write that down.
That's crossing the line.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like Amy Coney Barrett is a good example. Prominent Catholic, has personal beliefs on things, has assured us that her judgment is not persuaded by her religion. Now, again, do I think that judges have the right to have a personal religion?
Sure.
Yes, of course they do. First Amendment applies to everyone,
everybody,
no matter who they are.
That's right.
Right? You don't leave your religion at the door, so to speak.
No.
But at the same time, they cannot speak as a collective. She cannot be the Catholic justice.
Judge,
I do not like that label. I don't like the comparison that Biden is like the other Kennedy.
Yeah.
He's the only other Catholic president in history. I don't care. That shouldn't be what we,
tribalism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, you have these things that are like, especially when you're talking about the ethereal, so if Raphael Warnock can convince his congregation that somehow he is an agent of God in government, then why wouldn't they follow whatever crazy plan he wanted to do? Because he speaks on behalf of God, which is something bigger than politics. I think that's a dangerous road for Americans to go down, considering our Constitution protects us from the church state.
Yes. Christian Hall has been all over this recently with drawing the separations between the church and state, because a lot of people think that, it was to like you said, to force the church from having any type of influence on anything. And that wasn't necessarily the case. It was so that you didn't have to prescribe to a certain religion to be involved in the government. And it was so that the government could not say that you had to be X, Y, and Z. And that's where
Right.
a lot of people get confused and where they turn off pagans and atheists and people that don't subscribe to monotheism is because they're told that, well, the Constitution was written with a Catholic mindset, and it was meant, and what they really meant was it is Catholic or it is Christian, but they just didn't say it. And it's like, no, no. If you go back and you look at the individual religions of the founding fathers, almost every one of them had a different perspective and came from a slightly different religious background. Now, did they all have a monotheistic view? Yeah, it wasn't like they were running around worshiping a whole bunch of gods and goddesses, but they didn't subscribe to modern day Catholicism or Christianity at all.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you have, religious figures. Again, I don't believe that the founding fathers ever wanted the country to not have its faith,
Correct.
wanted the country to have its personal choice in faith.
Correct.
That there's a huge distinction there.
Yeah.
And so when the policies and protocols of government, the balances of power were written in, they cherry picked the cream of the crop across philosophy, across history, across the theology of
seven different doctrines that they looked at to base the Constitution on. They actually picked up the Magna Carta and all the different doctrines, the Roman Empire, and many different things that they looked at
correct
to create the Constitution. And those all come from many different theological backgrounds. I mean, they didn't ever subscribe to one thought process. And I think that was one of the nice things about having the Constitution so open ended. This is, was what we were going to talk about before was the fraud and how this actually gets back into the voters and how they turn out to vote and whatnot. But it was just kind of interesting to see the manipulative process when you talked about expanding voter blocks. So everybody wants to talk about how, well, the Constitution didn't say men and women. The Constitution didn't say you could be a pagan and you could be, and everyone wants to play the micromanagement game. But that was the point. It was open ended so that we didn't have to name all the things that it had to be. We only named what it was, and then whatever wasn't involved wasn't involved. But as we're moving through time, it seems like we almost want to restrict ourselves and say no, no, we have too much freedom. How do we go from wanting freedom to now we have too much freedom? We can't do these things.
Right. Yeah. It's an evolution for sure. But the intent was there. Universal truths tend to be the basis on which the end result, the Constitution, was founded.
Mm-hmm.
The things that are good for all people, no matter what walk of life. So, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not happiness.
Not guaranteed.
Because happiness is subjective.
True.
And so the pursuit is a definitive. Pursuit is verb. And so we can get down together with a verb and we can all pursue together in different ways. So there are things that the Constitution do to protect us that other documents cannot.
No.
And, I think that the overarching thought that I had going into this and what bothered me the most was how anti-Christian it all is to be socially, politically domineering.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the scripture, and anybody out there can show me otherwise, please do. Send, put a comment in, do something. But the scripture never describes any person, prophet or speaker or God himself, Jesus on earth, came to change the society into what it wanted, other than Israel. Israel is the only country that in the scripture is set apart, set up by God himself, and managed by God himself. He set up their political system. He set up their land. He set up everything. He defined the lineage, everything. No one else is included in that. And what I find in American politics is that we are spoken of in those circles, in the evangelical circles, like we are the new Israel, which I think is just blasphemous to start, and antithetical to Christianity. So that's where I get off board, right there, right at the beginning.
I'm jumping ship.
Right. I can't be associated with anyone who thinks that somehow we are now the promised land. We are now the people of God, and that America is a Christian nation that God is going to preserve into perpetuity. That's not true. America is not going to be preserved by God, whether you believe in him or not. I'm telling you, as a Christian, God is not going to preserve America. Somebody
No.
else might, one of your deities might need to step up, because mine isn't. Mine isn't going there. It's not his bag.
Well, it's funny because you know what? I happen to agree with you. I don't believe that God is going to save America, and I don't believe that there's any deity that's going to save America because um, everything comes full circle, in my opinion. So we wax and we wane with time, and we follow nature, and nature states that history repeats itself. So we are doomed to repeat, we are doomed to fail, and we are doomed to be reborn again, is ultimately what I believe. So we're not even too far off base there either.
Yeah.
It's like you
So
said, it's subjective.
So if they can get you off board with that kind of talk, and they get me off board with that kind of talk, then
Democrats are
who's
in
left?
heaven.
Who's left in the Republican Party but the kooky kooks?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then how
And
much?
they're taking over, and they
Yeah,
want to take over.
they'll be marginalized. They are a minority.
Yeah.
And then the Democrats by default win. It's
Yeah.
completely genius.
It
It's
is. It is genius. It is completely. And you know what? We've done so good on time. We've got 5 minutes left. And I think we've come a really long way in this conversation. We've covered everything. I can't possibly think of a better way to destroy America from the inside out than to set in motion the devious plans that they have set in motion. And again, we're not talking about just the 2016 election or the 2020 election. We're going back in time. Now, we didn't really present a whole lot of past evidence because on this channel, we actually believe on you guys picking up some of the legwork here. We lay down a couple facts. You guys got to pick it up. We put all the links in the description, and you got to go from there. But it's funny because as we've talked, there's been a couple things that have crossed my mind personally. Like you said, now we've got the expanded voting block where you have uneducated voters voting. You have educated voters being turned off by party politics, and it's nothing but a bunch of political cults.
right. And by that distraction, then how are we as a party going to move forward? That is a big question that everyone's asking. What is the Republican Party going to do without Trump or with Trump?
With Trump, yeah, with or without. You're right.
Because if we're without Trump, who are we? And if we are with Trump, then what are we?
Well, and that's it. It's not even that Republicans subscribe to Trump is our party, because I don't want it to sound like we subscribe. You and I don't subscribe to that at all. I'm a Republican through and through. I mean, before Trump, after Trump, I'm here in the party, but the party has left me. Like a lot of Democrats have said, the Democratic Party has left them. The Republican Party has left us behind.
Yeah, I think it's time for the Republican Party to re-up and modify their platform.
Yes.
I want to know exactly what it is that they stand for in 2021, because what I subscribe to, the principles, make me a Republican. If those
Yes.
are no longer on the platform, then I'm no longer a Republican. I don't know what the hell I am.
Well, here's the thing. I will always be a Republican, but I will not allow you to call yourself a Republican because definitions of words, they words have meanings. And this was one of the things that actually got me started in this whole political train was the fundamental definitions of words changing. I wanted to be a writer growing up. That was my dream, and I was going to go to NYU, and I was going to screenwrite, and I was going to go to Hollywood, and all this stuff that never panned out because when you start waking up and realizing this is not what English is, this is not the proper way to write a paper, a persuasive paper. We shouldn't be shaming people into our ideas. We should be exchanging ideas. Where did this bully culture, this cancel culture, this you're either with me or you're against me type of mentality? I'm not sure where it came from, but it's here, and I refuse to subscribe to it in any sort of mainstream way, which is how we got here.
Right. Yeah. Ideally, what I would like the Republican Party to do is go back to where it started and then let the constituents know, like it or lump it.
True.
I would not like to see them revise their platform, because again, if they revise the platform,
No.
they are perverting the word.
Yeah.
And so just as I distance myself now from the word evangelist because it's been tainted,
Toxic.
and the Republican, and again, it doesn't, the validity of the claim doesn't matter. It's the claim that gets the attention, and then that's what gets fought about.
Yes.
That's where the problem lies. So they say something, they put out a statistic, and then everyone goes to town. The assumption is that the statistic is correct.
Right.
I'm not good with the word, but yeah,
No.
so the stat is correct. And so, yeah, so I think that's a common tactic on the left, is that they get to define the problems, and the spinelessness on the right is that instead of saying there is no problem, what are you talking about? We come up with a better way to fix the non-existent problem.
The non-existent problem. I love it because that's it. 100%. You're right. We've been on the defensive end, and not we. Our representatives have been on the defensive end because
jellyfish.
we've been saying for how long? Come on, this is a non-issue. Come on, let's just move forward. I mean, Trump told us we'd be tired of winning. Look, I wasn't tired of winning because we only made little victories. I'm all about the big show, man. I want the fireworks. I want the big trophy at the end. I want the congratulations. You're the undisputed winner of this race or whatever you want to call it. But the only way to win was for the entire country to be united and win together. So yeah, we were able to prove a point here, and we were able to prove truth here. We didn't break through and get the big win that we needed, and that's why we lost 2020 ultimately, and that's why we will lose our country, in my humble opinion. Closing thoughts.
I agree. I think that if we continue to bicker about the social part of life, that we cannot get down to the policy part of life and what affects us and what matters to us in the end. We spent a large portion of Trump's presidency debating bathrooms, debating sports, the private companies' rights to do or not rights to do whatever it is that they're doing. I think that all of that is a by and large distraction. And in the background, gun rights were being stomped on, civil rights were being stomped on, and neither the left or right could pay attention to that. Immigration was never really controlled the way it should have been. You know, to take a hardline stance, but then we're kind of squishy in the execution.
Yep.
You know, so they talk big. They talk big. They make lots of promises. And then when it comes to brass tacks, we find out that they're really jellyfish inside and they don't really mean it. But it looked good during the campaign. Trump has said so much. That played well during the campaign, but now we don't really care.
Right.
He said such things about issues as regarding, you know, Hillary Clinton and Epstein and some of the other things that were hot button issues during his presidency. People were buying into the idea that he was somehow single-handedly Superman gonna take care of all the ills of the world. And I think that's how he got the reputation for being the second coming.
Yeah.
He was tacitly letting that happen. We need to throw cold water on bad ideas.
Yep.
One politician or one political group has the answers. That's not the point. The point of political parties is to ensure everybody gets a place at the table, everybody's represented fairly, and that the ideas battle it out, not the people.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And unfortunately, that is our hour. So that means we've got to go back to the drawing board after all this wonderful stuff and come up with another talking point for next week. But with that all being said, I had a blast and I hope to see everybody this time next week, 6 o'clock. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, everybody.